In this screencast, I'll be reading the first 3 paragraphs of Katherine Disenhof's essay titled Sweet Surprise. You'll notice that I won't be reading the introduction, the foreword by Disenhof's professor, but I would like you to read that as it gives some pretty good context for the essay. So I'm going to start here. The reason why I chose this essay is because it's an example of rhetorical analysis, and also because Disenhof, the author, really effectively supports her claims with specific details. And that's something you'll be working on in your rhetorical analysis as well. So let me start here from the beginning of the essay. Sweet surprise, visual rhetoric and the flawed message of the Corn Refiners Association's Sweet Surprise campaign. Disenhof begins her essay with a number of visuals. One that looks like a piece of corn that says, "Want a sweet surprise?" Another picture of a piece of corn, and over the top of that is written, "Nutritionally, high fructose corn syrup is the same as sugar or honey." And another sort of image or banner that says, "Get the facts at sweetsurprise.com." Okay, and we learn when we get to the bottom of these images that they are still shots from the Sweet Surprise campaign's online banners. Next, Disenhof quotes Audrey Erickson, president of the Corn Refiners Association, who says, "There are so many myths, inaccuracies, and untruths associated with high fructose corn syrup that we felt it necessary to set the record straight." And here's where Disenhof begins. The Corn Refiners Association is fighting back. In an attempt to combat the negative press and improve the reputation of high fructose corn syrup, the Corn Refiners Association announced its plans to launch the Sweet Surprise campaign in June of 2008. As detailed in the project's Campaign at a Glance news release, the association created the multimedia movement to, quote, change the conversation about high fructose corn syrup. Faced with an increasing amount of criticism, the sweetener is widely misunderstood. Flagged as the new trans fat by the general public, it is often wrongly accused of being the sole villain behind the nation's growing obesity and type 2 diabetes problems. Recognizing that the majority of consumers do not comprehend the similarities between sugar and high fructose corn syrup, the campaign specifically targets consumers over the age of 25, especially mothers. To accomplish this, it aims to share scientific facts, communicate in a responsible way, and provide credible sources of information. Currently, the campaign is comprised of 3 television advertisements, 3 web banners, 3 magazine advertisements, and 2 newspaper advertisements, all of which refer the viewer or reader to hfcsfacts.com, the official campaign website. I appreciate Disenhof's introduction because she gives us a pretty good summary of what the Corn Refiners Association's Sweet Surprise campaign actually is. And she also tells us what this campaign is trying to do. Now, these aren't necessarily Disenhof's ideas. She's simply sharing that this is what the campaign itself is claiming, that it's going to share scientific facts, communicate in a responsible way, and provide credible sources of information. And she gets that information from the very news release that the Corn Refiners Association itself put out. So I think that's really a great source she got that from. Okay, I'm going to start reading the second paragraph. And this is Katherine Disenhof speaking about why the campaign is important, why she chose to analyze it. The campaign is extremely pertinent to our lives today because high fructose corn syrup makes up an increasingly large portion of the American daily diet. In a Time magazine article written in response to the Sweet Surprise campaign's September launch, journalist Lisa McLaughlin reported that the United States food system manufactures approximately 56 pounds of the sweetener per person per year. Consequently, each of us ate nearly 60 pounds of high fructose corn syrup in 2006, in addition to a slightly smaller amount of sugar. Currently, almost 10% of the calories that American adults eat is derived from corn sweeteners, and that figure is 20% for most American children. In this way, the campaign addresses and influences a crucial ingredient in our diet. So Disenhof has done another important thing in her introduction here by explaining why we should be paying attention to what she has to say, why it's important that she analyzes this campaign. Okay, here we go. This is a big paragraph. The message of the campaign's advertisements is simple. High fructose corn syrup is made from corn, contains no artificial ingredients, is nutritionally the same as sugar, has the same amount of calories as sugar, and is fine in moderation. However, this evidence is a little too simplistic. While the campaign cleverly uses rhetorical strategies to convince viewers of its cause, its message relies heavily on logical fallacies and neglects to acknowledge its possible implications. Instead of an in-depth scientific explanation, the advertisements provide generalized, one-sided, oversimplified argument. Furthermore, the campaign recognizes that the stigma attached to high fructose corn syrup is a product of a more complex food culture flaw, but then proceeds to take advantage of that flaw to persuade its audience. With possible significant cultural and environmental ramifications, it is imperative that this campaign be carefully analyzed and thoroughly discussed. Okay, so I think that this paragraph contains Katherine Disenhof's thesis statement. And you can see right here where she starts to respond to what the campaign itself is saying. So note, this is what the Sweet Surprise campaign says. High fructose corn syrup is made from corn, contains no artificial ingredients, is nutritionally the same as sugar, has the same amount of calories as sugar, and is fine in moderation. This, however, marks the place where Disenhof is going to start responding to the campaign's claims. She says that this evidence is a little too simplistic. Then she goes on to say that while the campaign cleverly uses rhetorical strategies to convince viewers of its cause, its message relies heavily on logical fallacies and neglects to acknowledge its possible implications. That's really interesting. I get the feeling then that we're going to hear or read actually what the logical fallacies that Disenhof believes the Sweet Surprise campaign is making in its argument. And I'm also guessing she's going to talk about the implications of the message of the campaign. I understand what she means when she says, instead of an in-depth scientific explanation, the advertisements provide generalized, one-sided, oversimplified argument. Okay, that makes sense to me. I think she's going to show in her paper how the Sweet Surprise campaign oversimplifies its argument. Here, though, I'm starting to see stuff that I don't really understand and won't really understand until I get further into the essay. She claims the campaign recognizes that the stigma attached to high fructose corn syrup is a product of a more complex food culture flaw. Wow, I don't know what she's talking about there. I'm not sure what type of food culture flaw she's referring to here, so I'm going to wait and see if she explains that later in the essay. And that the Sweet Surprise campaign proceeds to take advantage of that flaw to persuade its audience. Okay, even more interesting. How does the Sweet Surprise campaign take advantage of a food culture flaw to persuade its audience? I'm looking forward to seeing to what she claims and how she supports that claim. Finally, she ends this first paragraph with her reason for why we should listen to what she's saying. With possible significant cultural and environmental ramifications, it is imperative that this campaign be carefully analyzed and thoroughly discussed. Okay, I'm ready for her to start giving her argument.